Overrated and underrated are words that are very overused, and the criteria for each seem to vary a lot person to person. Usually I like to skip intros as the titles should be pretty self-explanatory. It's a video about underrated guitarists, I'm not exactly going to be talking about rocket science. But because of people's varying criteria for determining what is underrated, I think it's best to explain my criteria for what I think makes a guitarist underrated, and further explain my selections so people have a better understanding of my picks, even if they disagree. If you don't care and you just want to see the list, then skip to this timestamp. I believe to be truly underrated, you have to not be very well known by the general public. The way I determined if a guitar player was well known by the wider audience was to check some of the big music websites' greatest guitarists ever lists and compare them to my selections. And out of all of my selections, only one of my picks appears on any of these lists, at the number 83 spot out of 100. On top of this criteria, I also try to include guitarists from different musical backgrounds, so you don't just get a list of heavy metal guitarists, so expect to see some multiple genres and styles represented. I should also state that there are tons of other underappreciated and underrated guitarists in many genres out there that I am probably unaware of, and this list here is by no means a definitive top 5 most underrated guitarists. No, these are just a few guitarists that I personally really enjoy, that I believe deserve a little bit more recognition. Sorry for the long intro, but this can be quite a touchy subject, where you'll get many comments asking about why guitarists X, Y, and Z weren't included, or comments saying this guitarist isn't very good, why did you include them? So I just wanted to explain myself and preempt these comments so people don't, oh, who am I kidding, they already skipped to the list, didn't they? Eddie Hazel is the guitarist that appears at number 83 on the Rolling Stones list, and for such an influential guitarist, I feel he deserves more attention and even a higher placement for the work he has done. Whilst music critics and guitar enthusiasts might see him as a great, if you asked a random passerby on the street who Eddie Hazel was, I doubt you would get many people who actually knew who he was. Making his name known in the band Funkadelic, a massive funk collaboration group spearheaded by funk legend George Clinton, he instantly showed his expertise on the axe in the first couple of albums Funkadelic released, such as Maggot Brain and Free Your Mind and Your Ass Will Follow. I thought that I had discovered all of the guitar heroes, but here was this 20-something guy with an amazing tone and funky feeling that I never even knew about, and no one ever mentioned him to me. I only discovered him through late-night BBC4 documentaries on TV, when they talked about the history of funk and the guitar. I think many others know him from his magnum opus, Maggot Brain, a 10-minute guitar solo over this mellow, repeating riff, where Eddie shows you everything he has to offer. It starts out very, very relaxed and somber, with an arpeggiated guitar repeating the same riff over and over and over again. This is also accompanied by dissonant noises from echoing, screeching feedback, whilst the drums and bass are faded into the background and are very quiet. This creates this somber, relaxing mood. And then, from this muted, relaxed sound comes Eddie's guitar with this wailing bend. It is so simple as a first note, but it sets up the song exceptionally well and hooks you immediately after sticking out of this hypnotic echoes and feedback panned throughout the entire track by Clinton. The solo and the song are so immediate that they capture your attention for the full 10-minute runtime. And Eddie's guitar work keeps you listening as it goes through different sections filled with guitar techniques and tools. Eddie displays off slow bends, speedy hammer-ons and pull-offs, intentional manipulation of wailing feedback, and a lot of mileage out of the effects pedals, such as the wah-wah. It's also accompanied by some fuzz and distortion pedals, and this thick fuzz and distortion is quite a distinctive sound and iconic to Funkadelic and Eddie. You're not really used to funk sounding this rough. I mentioned a few times in my ranking Radiohead video that usually lyrics don't affect me as much as the sound of the vocals driving them, which is why I gravitate towards an instrument like the guitar so much. A proficient guitar player can use playing techniques such as vibrato or bends to get across a wide array of feelings and soundscapes, much like vocals. And this song is that point exemplified. From Eddie's guitar work on Maggot Brain, I have felt mellow and calm, angry and angsty, happy and sad across many different listens, as Eddie's guitar playing weaves in and out of these emotions and textures through the track's 10-minute runtime. Starting off slow with some soulful bends, it then goes into some quite aggressive playing, where Eddie makes the guitar shriek, and then the atmosphere will slow down again as you get these reverb dissonant hammer-ons, which sound like they're played on a bass guitar almost. And then he comes back to shredding once again at the end. He gets a lot out of this simple repeating instrumental. For any guitarist looking for a new track to jam over, try finding a backing track of Maggot Brain, or get a loop pedal and set up the same 4-chord repeating riff. Trust me, it is so much fun to jam over. You can do pretty much anything with it. Although this song cannot be replicated the same way as Eddie. Try as I may, I can never sound like Eddie. He is just such an emotive guitar player, and his bends and playing just taps into something that I have difficulty explaining. And it is for this reason that I want other people to listen to his music, because I am so invested in his playing myself. I'd rank him alongside David Gilmour for players that really don't shred or play very fast too often, but they make every single note feel purposeful, with one of the greatest vibratos out there. His control in his bends and vibrato leads to the sound that emulates a vocal performance. Quite a few guitarists who can't sing, like myself, attempt to make the guitar sing for them, to put their feeling into a sound that they could never possibly achieve without the guitar. And Eddie puts out such a beautiful and poignant sound that sings over this somber song in ways a vocalist never could. Although I should probably point out that Eddie has a really nice voice, with a soulful timbre to it in his vocal performances, in his solo work and Funkadelic. Just go listen to Open Our Eyes and you'll see what I'm talking about. It's incredible how some musicians can make such an impactful feeling in a song with little to no vocals. Maggot Brain sounds like a bereavement song. It sounds like losing someone or something and knowing you can never get it back. It's a harsh acceptance of your situation that you are powerless to stop. This may seem obvious when reading a title called Maggot Brain and then linking it to death, but that's just what it sounds like. It sounds like a song about death just from listening to Eddie's performance. And I praised Eddie's accuracy on the guitar, but in this song specifically, this may not be the best example. Maggot Brain is a very human song. Eddie's playing is not completely accurate. It's not without imperfections. You can hear Eddie's fingers inadvertently play other strings, and his bends aren't as fully formed as they are on more tighter Funkadelic songs, such as Standing on the Verge of Getting It On, which from the title you can probably guess it's a very different type of song. Maggot Brain is messy, dark, angry, sorrowful. It's about grief, and it does not need vocals to tell you this, and it doesn't need to be well put together either. And if it was a clean, seamless song with none of these imperfections, I feel like it wouldn't work as well as it does. It's just him letting all of his emotions out. If you want further evidence of this, you can read into the background of the song's inception, which is often misreported as Clinton telling Eddie his mother died whilst he was under the influence of LSD. Really, he told Eddie to imagine his mother had just passed away, whilst George was on LSD. Maggot Brain isn't a fluke either. His solo cover of the Mamas and the Papas' California Dreaming is this more upbeat and still emotive masterpiece, with this slap bass playing whilst Eddie plays smoothly over the track with his various effect pedals filling in this sound. Separate from George Clinton's production, which can sometimes be a bit extreme with the harsh panning constantly changing, on California Dreaming, Eddie's guitar work is front and center. And it's just a master at work, effortlessly playing over this tight instrumentation, making this massive sound of his pedals like delay, which plays throughout the entire track, filling this empty space left by the rest of the instrumentation. Maggot Brain and California Dreaming are both masterpieces in motive playing. But sometimes you just really want to rock out, and well, Eddie has you covered here too. There are many albums and songs where Eddie just goes into pure rock and roll, and this is the majority of his work actually. His compositions and riffs in this song could fit into the heaviest of blues rock songs, and it gives Funkadelic this rock edge that makes it more separate from other funk bands. His playing does contribute to the iconic and distinctive Funkadelic rock sound. It shows he can be extremely precise and surgical, as well as loose and passionate. Funk needs a steady beat, and whilst it can be loose and expressionate, it's in these tight grooves that gives it its danceable vibe, and the riffs Eddie uses are both meticulous and heavy in their execution. It's probably a good place to point out that he was heavily influenced by Hendrix, and you can hear his influence through his playing on these more rock-orientated songs, which are heavily distorted and covered in fuzz, and usually based on the blues scale and have some blues elements to them, much like Hendrix. But Eddie takes this sound and implements it into funk songs that stem further away from the blues and rock and roll roots Hendrix delves into. He is definitely inspired by Hendrix, there's no doubt about it, but do not be mistaken, his sound is very different and distinctive from Hendrix. Overall, he is the whole package. His playing can be jagged, emotive, unclean, and he can also play with pinpoint accuracy, chugging a steady riff with his funk band. As well as being underrated in my opinion, he is one of my personal favourites, and I hope some of you who are unfamiliar with his work will go out and see his records with Funkadelic and his solo work, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I have. So, basically, go listen to Funkadelic, it will change your life. Well, probably not, but they made some bloody good songs. Joey Santiago. From more of a virtuoso type of playing to a rougher, unrefined punk style. As I mentioned in the intro, I thought it was a good idea to try and include guitarists from a wide range of musical styles and backgrounds that excel in different areas some may not take notice of. And that's where Joey Santiago comes in, lead guitarist of Pixies. For those unfamiliar with the name Pixies, I imagine you've already heard of them before without even realizing it. Most likely their song, Where Is My Mind? Where Is My Mind, their biggest, most well-known song by far, shows everything that Pixies does well. It starts with the sound of Kim Deal's howling backing vocals, whilst Frank Black plays a simple, catchy 4-chord phrase on an acoustic guitar with a timbre that sounds like old wires scraping together, probably because he might be playing with a metal plectrum. Anyway, this all creates this dark, mellow, ominous sound. Then this rough, menacing drum sound from Jacob erupts the song before the previous mellow vibe is finally fully broken by the cutting sound of Joey Santiago's screeching guitar. From reading my script, it may seem like I am insulting the Pixies by my description, but it's this abrasive, dirty, underproduced, gritty sound mixed with the Beatles-esque pop song structures that makes them so enjoyable and surprisingly easy on the ears once you get past this chaotic sound and Frank Black's lyrics. Joey Santiago and Pixies in general find perfection in simplicity. A simple lick like the one in Where Is My Mind serves the song so well, and it never overthrows the vocals or the bass or the drums. And there are even sections where there is zero playing from Joey, like in the pre-chorus, which allows this space that existed before the guitar came in the intro to come back into the mix again, so Joey's guitar can again slice through it. This is a perfect example of the loud, quiet, loud dynamic which Nirvana and grunge would go on to make popular. The simple lead guitar never steals the spotlight, or if it does, it's only for a short amount of time. And Joey doesn't need a long amount of time to steal the show. In Where Is My Mind, even Joey's solo is very simple, and it's not even 10 seconds long, But even now, I remember every single note of it, and it's stuck in my head as much as the main lick, which shows off how Joey can make these simple riffs and solos which suit the song and stick in your head, which is a very difficult trait, especially for the amount of songs Pixies has done this exact same thing for. Joey's tone is very messy, and you can hear all of the imperfections of the guitar. The sound of his fingers sliding on the guitar, the background noise and fuzz, it's generally unclean and raw. It's even more primal and raw than Eddie's guitar on Maggot Brain, which I like for the same reasons. His tone has this lingering high frequency in it, which gives this abrasive screeching noise that blends into Pixie's rough sound. And again, it probably sounds like I'm describing this sound as not very pleasurable, but Pixies isn't easy listening music. It's heavy, menacing, threatening, and so this guitar tone suits this racket perfectly. And this harsh racket, mixed with the previously mentioned pop melodies and structures, is what makes Pixies and Joey so great. With this unprocessed and overdriven sound, he has a real knack for pop-like catchiness as displayed in the cheery, almost parody-like song Here Comes Your Man, which, no surprise here, is their second biggest song, as it has a wider appeal. Opposite of the crazy chaos of a song like Dead or Something Against You, it is a lot more cleaner, but it doesn't lose this sarcastic edge, especially with Joey's screeching guitar. His guitar work through the track continues this melodic nature by sliding up and down the fretboard to match the chords of the song with arpeggiated licks, but his signature wailing bends still make themselves apparent in the solo. But again, they never overthrow the rest of the song to negatively affect the happy-go-lucky vibe of the song, showing his restraint and control as a guitarist. Despite being very punk-orientated, he has an amazing ear for melodies which elevates the punk stylings of each song as they get really catchy. As well as this simplistic style, on a handful of other songs, he has this vicious playing method where Joey uses the guitar in many unorthodox ways to create brash noises. He doesn't use conventional means like thrashing power chords or shredding. In Vamos, he has this mad bend that just comes out of nowhere, and it sounds like he's just shaking the guitar violently instead of having any nuance, vibrato or technique. And this sound is just such an amazing counter to Frank Black's lyrics and just the acoustic instrumentation. Then in the breakdown of the song, he'll just create soundscapes to go along with the absolute chaos of the song by using sparse random hits and odd notes, playing with feedback and overdubs, and doing whatever the hell he is doing here. Usually you'd probably see this type of playing and think it is nothing but pretentious nonsense. But it's all in the presentation and effect, and as well as sounding great and illustrating madness in the song, Joey and the band has this air about them that just makes it seem like there is just no pretension whatsoever. There's just a bunch of musicians having fun whilst making these odd sounds and experimenting. These unorthodox playing styles helps the controlled madness that Pixies dwells in. And these odd sounds all complement the rough noise of Pixies perfectly well. His playing may appear to be uncalculated and messy, and very simple, although it is surprisingly deceptive in its simplicity. The mad sections of Vamos require lots of energy to complete, and this fast aggressive playing and his aggressive, unhinged vibrato, it's pretty difficult to mimic. Joey showed to me the versatility of the guitar. There is more to the guitar than just being a rhythm or lead instrument. These sparse and harsh noises adds a lot to the Pixies sound. Joey's playing on the guitar showed me how refraining from playing in some sections and giving the song room to breathe can make it far better than any additions you could make. And it makes what you do add to the track far more impactful. He showed me how far a little bend in a song could go. Even in the song Dead, a lot of the song is just a bend on one note that screeches over the track, acting like a repeated vocal line and backing vocals. He gets a lot of mileage out of his tone. Joey is a fantastic guitarist that contributed to a genre that would eventually surpass the band in popularity. But amongst music fans, Pixies is already known as one of the best bands to ever play, full stop. Seriously, I would rank them up there with the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, and I don't think I'd have many people saying I was wrong to do that. I don't believe that's a controversial opinion, maybe it is. I'm sure some of you will let me know. But their 4-album run from Surfer Rosa all the way to Trompe le Monde is just impeccable. And one of their reasons for their success is Joey's guitar work. Graham Coxon. I have spoken a lot about versatility as a great trait in a guitarist from these first 2 guitarists on my list. It's better to experiment instead of just being stuck in the same sound for 10 to 20 odd years, and the next guitarist on this list is no exception. As a fan of Blur, and with the majority of my audience being from the US, I should stress that whilst Blur wasn't very big in the States, they were massive in the UK. I would consider Graham underrated in America due to how few people in America know of Blur's wider discography, with the majority of the general public in America only really knowing of the massive hit Song 2, which ironically was intended to be a joke for the record executives.
Tell the record label that we want to record it as a single. That'll scare them to death. They'll hate it. And so that's what we did, and they came in and we played it to them, giggling, going, they're like, wow, this is excellent. So our joke was foiled.
But even outside of the US, I don't think Graham gets enough credit for his guitar work across his career with Blur, which helped them become the massive household name they are in the UK currently. Seriously, I cannot understate how big Blur were in the UK and how many of their songs, nearly 30 years later, are ingrained in our culture. Ask any Brit in passing, they are bound to know at least one song, whether it be Parklife, Girls and Boys, The Universal, Country House, the list is quite big. And Blur's rise to a household name and their massive success was definitely helped by the fantastic guitar work of Graham Coxon. I would describe Coxon's playing as excessive and energetic. His propensity to do as much as he can in a single song is the direct opposite approach of Santiago. Graham tries to do as much as possible in one song, which makes it feel energetic and full of life. It also shows how both approaches to guitar can work depending on music, genre, or song, as both of these styles work for each of the guitarists' music. The bright, energetic and cheery sound Graham goes for is very Britpop, and the simple, nihilistic and rough sound that Joey has suits Pixies and alt-rock perfectly. Back to Graham, his playing all stems from a sense of boredom with the guitar. Guitar seemed to be tried and true in every area in the 90s. Big rock songs were still everywhere, American grunge had taken over, and virtuoso guitar playing seemed dead in the mainstream ever since punk. And hell, even simple punk went underground at that point. At that time, it didn't seem like there were any other ways to play the guitar. It sounds like Graham just started doing anything he could instead of settling on one direct style in the early era of Blur, which gives their early discography this massive variety. Just from listening to Blur's older records, Graham really does go all out on certain songs, doing these small things that may not seem very complex to non-guitar players. But the accuracy and swiftness of these little licks and phrases in songs like Villa Rosa is so difficult to do. Literally, my hand cramped up learning this section. He was trying to get as much as possible out of the instrument that seemed already drained, and then he was trying to fit whatever sound he would create out of this madness back into this pop framework. His tone has always been pretty aggressive too. Going back to very pop-orientated songs like Girls and Boys, it starts off being the furthest thing away from aggressive, with a groovy bass line played by Alex over this stabby synth line as Damon's chipper and sarcastic vocals come into the track. But then the guitar comes in and it has this crunchy, overdriven sound which smashes into the track. And then just before the chorus, a rough sound plays, which I think is Graham running a pick down a string with a phaser effect, showing the edge that Graham brought to this Britpop sound, and even sprinkling in some hints of what was to come. His guitar solo on this song is very reminiscent of the guitar work on Ashes to Ashes, particularly the song Fashion. showing Graham's kickback against the standard rock and roll blues-inspired licks, and the Britpop sound of current times of bands like Suede, Pulp and Oasis, and instead going with something more experimental and abstract, adding a new layer to this simple song. Also, when trying to learn his guitar sections when I was younger, I was always surprised to see how complex his playing really was. If you go on ultimateguitar.com for any of the Blur songs, some of them won't sound right because of these little additions he makes with his sound and playing. Even on simple songs, he always adds an odd strum pattern or a fast lick or random chord change into a diminished, which just throws the entire song off, which just shakes things up a bit and adds a unique sound on each repetition of the chorus or the verse. He always adds something extra to make a song stand out that little bit more. Whilst I love the contributions that Graham gives in the earlier era of Blur, it's what happens after Blur lost the war against Oasis in the battle for Britpop where I really think he comes into his own as a guitar player. And his work post the Great Escape album is what made me add him to this list. Spotting the death of Britpop along with the rest of Blur, they moved along quickly in favour of a more alternative sound. Whilst bands like Radiohead and The Verve set new standards in the British alternative sound, with melancholic songs about alienation and with a more pessimistic view compared to the happy-go-lucky Britpop attitude, Blur did not follow suit with this isolated, colder sound, and instead, ironically for Britpop icons, took heavy influence from American lo-fi music from acts such as Pavement and Dinosaur Jr. And the result of this was their self-titled 1997 album Blur, which contains by far their biggest hit, Song 2. This album has far more experimentation, particularly with the guitar, from its sounds, tones, and even Graham's playing. He seems to double down on his previous attitude to fit as much as he can into an album by making every song even more unique and using far more experimental sounds. He uses a delay pedal to sound like a synth on songs like More, and a strange, overdriven, clanky noise that sounds like a car engine on Essex Dogs, and using strange, rough, heavily manipulated solos in the song Country Sad Ballad Man. He really does do something brand new on each song on this album. His solos from here on out are rarely melodic, catchy or straightforward. They are abstract and in your face, usually composed of sparse sounds and heavy use of effect pedals, shying even further away from his contemporaries using obvious scales and patterns in favour of this eerie and unnatural sounding noise. The entire album and Graham's guitar work definitely give you this impression that they are making a statement that this is definitely not Britpop anymore. And with the band also going all in on this sound, from Alex's lower, deeper and more lo-fi bass sound, untreated and brash simple drumming from Dave, and Damon's songwriting delving into personal experiences rather than quaint British characters, they all commit to this lo-fi sound, whilst incorporating some of their more pop-style writing sensibilities to enhance what made the lo-fi American sound so appealing. On this same album is a highlight of Graham's career, and it is the gem of a song, You're So Great. A song entirely by Graham, it is very, very lo-fi even for this album, with a vinyl-esque crackling playing throughout the entire track. Unprocessed vocals, loud thudding and untreated guitars panned left and right that don't seem to follow the same strumming patterns and often fall in and out of sync. And on top of this, there is this low quality, dirty electric guitar sound which Graham uses to create one of my favourite solos from him, which is equally disorganised and abstract as it is touching and warm. Away from the heavy production and refined sound in Blur's earlier career, the production, or lack thereof, on this song shows the guitar in its primal state. Creaking strings, fuzz and background noise, it is stripped down and bare, which fits the naked, up-close vocal performance performed by Graham. As Graham sings the song, he also expertly plays, filling in the blank areas of the song with these little licks and changes which I described earlier. This lo-fi song is something so anti-Blur, it is pretty funny to think that these are the same blokes that made Charmless Man and Country House just 2 years earlier. which shows how quick Graham's push for the guitar to be more abrasive and anti-Britpop was. Just a push to try new things. A pattern that you may have spotted amongst all my picks so far is that I like guitarists to serve the song just as much as the bass or drums. To me, that is another identifiable trait of a great guitarist. Knowing when to hold back and when to flaunt your stuff, which Graham displays on all of Blur's albums. Even their most recent outing, The Magic Whip, which feels much more like a Graham album than a Damon or Blur album, but even then, he still doesn't take away from the bass, drums or vocals. They are all working together in tandem to enhance every song. Of course, there is a bit of indulgence here and there to show off his guitar chops in songs like Go Out, which descends from a catchy small riff to a distorted and erratic solo, but these solos never negatively affect the songs for the sake of the guitar, which in other bands can be an issue for me personally. That's why I wanted to speak about Graham. His versatility and his decision to change when things were getting stale and just an eagerness to experiment whilst having a massive fan base is brave and deserving of recognition. And the ability to form a formidable career in guitar despite not hanging on to the well-known scales and blueprints that many others follow makes him far more unique and impressive. Now, on to the next. Nick Drake is the furthest thing from a guitar hero that you could imagine. A quiet, reserved, and introverted individual singing in a whispered, unassuming voice in abstract poems and phrases about rivermen, pink moons, and fruit trees. All whilst playing using complex chords, alternative tunings, and fingerpicking. He has received mountains of praise from critics and folk fans alike, being seen as the blueprint for the acoustic singer-songwriter sound, penning somber and melancholic songs that have inspired many, many influential artists, despite his short career. Despite being very influential, his sound is very difficult to replicate. Even listening to current folk and folk around Nick's era, you won't find the same atmospheres that Nick Drake creates with his songs, because his guitar playing is just far more elaborate than what you would think. And it is his guitar playing that sets him apart from other singer-songwriters. With an acoustic guitar, he manages to make this massive, pleasant and sweet full sound with his use of cluster chords, which is a chord made from adjacent notes on a scale. I think I've understood that correctly. I don't know much about theory on the guitar. I just kind of like smash it and sound comes out of it somehow. But these cluster chords have this full sound to them that can sound quite melancholic and dissonant. Songs like Place to Be show how these cluster chords and his style of playing can create a soothing sound that a standard type of acoustic guitar playing just couldn't replicate. It also shows how Nick Drake can get this little bit of extra sound out of these chords with his slow strums and picking. With the use of cluster chords, Nick also had to tune his guitar to odd tunings to make it easier to play these chords, which again makes him sound far more unique from his contemporaries. The use of these alternative tunings allowed him to strum his chords and at the same time play these melody lines to create this wall of sound effect, which spreads out across the stereo space of the song. These melodies I mentioned earlier that he manages to play on the guitar in these alternative tunings is done through fingerpicking, which is a type of playing I haven't went into yet. Honestly, fingerpicking is something that I am terrible at, and I'm envious of players that are able to play more than a melody and a bass line at the same time. But the thing is with fingerpicking, it literally adds a human touch to the guitar, and it usually sounds warmer and more natural when compared to a pick, which can be snappy and harsh. It is also extremely difficult to play these two melodies on the guitar at once while strumming every so often and also singing and staying in time. Nick was extremely talented. Imagine doing all of this work and singing on top of it. Bloody hell, I can't even play Don't Look Back in Anger and sing at the same time. You can hear this previously mentioned fingerpicking style in songs like Things Behind the Sun, which sounds like two guitar players are playing at once, which is the benefit of fingerpicking, playing leads and rhythm at the same time, or even using the E string to play a bass line. The accuracy and speed of his playing is commendable, and it shows that in this field of acoustic guitar playing, Nick was a master of his craft, doing intricate riffs and composing with unique chords and tunings, which some still replicate today, but never mastered like him. He spent many nights just toying away on his guitar, trying to get unique sounds out of it, and it shows. I have mentioned liking the stripped down sounds of Joey, Graham and Eddie, but you can't get more stripped down than Pink Moon. Pink Moon is literally just a bloke and his guitar, with the intro song having one piano riff. It takes a lot to engage someone with just an acoustic guitar and his voice, and you never lose interest in Nick's playing. Always having a little lick in there somewhere, or just an odd melody line that just flows wonderfully with his open tunings. He is also very proficient at the guitar. Coming from a classical guitar background, Nick has all the fundamentals down in place whilst using his knowledge of classical and jazz to create somber acoustic guitar songs unique from his contemporaries. Honestly, I wish I can go further in depth into Nick's playing, like I did with Eddie and Joey, but it is a very different style from mine, which goes to show how versatile this bit of wood is. Alternative tunings, cluster chords, fingerpicking, arpeggios, all these techniques come together to make the Nick Drake sound, which can be comforting, calming, and reassuring, and it can also be saddening, gloomy, and sorrowful, depending on the song. And it's mad to think that after all these years, songs like Pink Moon, Man in a Shed, and Northern Sky still all cut deep into people. He still has such an influence 50 years removed from Pink Moon, his final album and his masterpiece. It probably comes as no surprise that the introverted singer-songwriter proficient in guitar can create mellow, depressing music. But I thought I'd just state that despite the somber nature of some of his songs, there is a timbre to his playing that has this uplifting feeling. I wouldn't describe his music as depressing or as melancholic as, say, Elliott Smith, who explicitly is very sad in some songs, but there is this curiosity in Nick's lyrics that combines with his unorthodox guitar playing to make this sound which, for a lack of a better word, sounds magical. Again, this method of play is alien to me, as someone with a more blues and post-punk inspired background. It would literally take me years to play like Nick Drake, of which it did him, spending many hours honing his craft and experimenting with alternative tunings and fingerpicking styles to deliver a short but sweet repertoire that continues to inspire to this day. And I hope some of you check out some of his music. I hope you like his stuff as much as I have. I am a massive fan of Joy Division, and when I was growing up I would watch any documentary I could find about them, which led me to find out about Factory Records, along with its owner Tony Wilson and the legendary producer Martin Hannett, responsible for the Joy Division sound. Factory Records and everything surrounding it was a very important and key moment in Manchester's musical history, and Britain as a whole, and probably music as a whole, to be honest. And there are many musicians and albums coming from this short period that were just groundbreaking works. But next to the groundbreaking music, there was also the groundbreaking production and album art. During my binging of these documentaries, there was a section dedicated to the art of Factory Records, namely the cover art created for music works produced under Factory. All unique and distinctive. And sometimes the art contains really out there ideas, such as making a floppy disk design for a 12-inch single, which was so expensive to make they were actually selling the album at a loss, at about 5p loss on every sale. Boy, I hope that 12-inch single doesn't become the biggest selling 12-inch in UK history. How does it feel? This sums up the attitude of Factory as uncompromising and doing anything to make the greatest bit of art they could. But there was one album they spoke of in this section that really grabbed my attention. For this album, the outer sleeve was made out of sandpaper. So when you would put this record in your collection, it would destroy the records surrounding it. I thought that this was the most punk and coolest artwork ever. and I could only imagine what hardcore, punk-inspired madness would await me on that album. It must sound completely mental. That album was The Return of the Durruti Column by The Durruti Column. And so I searched it up on YouTube and found the track Sketch for Summer. I was expecting a harsh racket to start and just burst my eardrums, but instead, I was met by an odd, sharp synth noise, which sounded like birds chirping. And then an odd, muddy kick drum and snare started playing a minimalistic beat. And then in comes this cascading, beautiful guitar sound, shimmering through the entire mix, swirling around the empty space left by the drums and synth, playing these layered phrases with a clean chorus effect drenched in reverb. I went in feeling angry and bitter and wanting a loud, brutal listening experience. And instead, by the end of the song, I was just entranced and soothed and calmed by the guitar work, meticulously completed by guitarist Vinny Riley. You know those surreal moments in music where you hear a sound that you never even knew existed, and it kind of just takes you off guard. It's a great feeling, know that you found a new musical obsession. This was one of those moments for me. Vinny's style is very clean, with no distortion, and usually his guitar work is accompanied with delay or overdubs. On top of some fingerpicking, these types of styles go incredibly well together. The twangy, quick stabby effect you get when you fingerpick makes the clean, jangly tone really stick out in the mix. On top of this delay, you can hear these picked strings echo and reverberate around the entire track. Despite this soothing sound, his playing style is actually pretty aggressive. He is really pulling and plucking on those strings hard. With a heavier sound, it might have came across as very aggressive and angry. But with this bright tone, it comes across as feeling very energetic and swift instead. He's also an extremely fast and nimble player with his licks. Honestly, I'm blown away by some of his playing as he just goes up and down the fretboard in a jamming style to give us this layered sound and just a laid-back feeling. I am aware that in this video it may have seemed like I derided fast playing and shredding, but whilst I am not a fan of this style specifically, I realise that in order to play like this, it is an arduous and laborious task. When playing the guitar, you learn things slow first, and the most difficult part is speeding this up. As when you speed up your guitar playing, you encounter many issues. While slowing down, it's easy to press down on notes. When playing fast, it can be difficult, and if you don't play the notes down properly, it will create a clanking noise. On top of this as well, you need to stay in time, and then it becomes even more complex when you add in bending, vibrato, hammer-ons and pull-offs, whammy, finger-picking. Jesus Christ, there's a lot you can muck up when playing the guitar, and when you play really fast, it makes those outcomes more likely. But Vinny plays so bloody fast, with no errors whatsoever, in a crystal clear tone where every imperfection would have been audible. His playing is very sophisticated, and he does come from a classical guitar background. But being a part of Factory Records, which I described earlier, you'd think that his classical training and sophisticated sound wouldn't blend well with the DIY gloomy production work from Martin Hannett. Even though he only produced for the Durruti Column's first album, this DIY style works really well with Vinny's clean, polished sound. By submerging it into this dark sound, it brings out this melancholic sound lying within his playing. They just complement each other really well. It's a weird mix of this gloomy sound mixed with this laid-back, cheery vibe. But even on the second album, where Martin Hannett didn't produce it, the Durruti Column still sounds as strong as ever. The songs on here are just much more cleaner than the first record, but at the same time, that same slightly depressing jangle is still present. Playing with layers and delay with the classical guitar fingerpicking means he can layer more than others could when making a sound, and the most simple of arpeggios become these wall of clean sound. What I love most about his playing is that he switches a lot, He goes from these fast and laid-back licks as if he's jamming straight into these atmospheric layered chords, which are just punctuated with some special form of playing, maybe a harmonic there, or maybe a bend here. And with the delay and reverb, every time he does a harmonic or a bend, it just spreads throughout the entire mix and it just sounds massive. Like in the song Requiem for a Father, he has this clean ringing out sound and then all of a sudden, he'll just snap straight into this layered lick. It's easy to write fast licks, but it's harder to make a melody out of them. And Vinny has an ear for these, adding on to these simple songs with overdubs that poke through the mix and add some extra kick. Although as mentioned, sometimes it just feels like he's just jamming out and grooving, and then out of nowhere he'll just come in with this instantly catchy phrase that comes out of nowhere and still flows well within the track. Vinny is an expert in creating these ghostly, ethereal-like melodies that build upon themselves, and I can listen to an entire album of him just jamming with his effect pedals all day. I don't think you'll be blown away in the same way you would on a first listen of Hendrix, but Vinny has a feel, tone and style that I find myself constantly going back to, and my appreciation for his playing grows with every new song I hear from him. Plus, as Tony Wilson said, it's good music to chill out to.
It's good music to chill out to. Yeah, you're right. I usually am.
And that is my short list of underrated guitarists. Anyways, guitar is an amazing instrument, incredibly versatile, prominent in many genres and causing the creation of others. With millions of things that you can do with it, I hope I have brought some attention to some of these players where some watchers may not have ever heard of them before. And hopefully some of you go out of your comfort zone to listen to some of these maestros. Maybe if you're a metalhead, you might find some appreciation in Nick Drake's music. Or if you're someone from a classical guitar background, maybe you should pop on a bit of Blur. Anyways, you know what? Throughout this entire video process, from researching, listening attentively, and trying to cover these songs of these guitarists, to try and understand their style, I've learned something. I bloody suck at guitar. Thank you for watching that video in its entirety. I really do appreciate it. When I first started making this video, I had about 5 subscribers, and as of recording this, I now somehow have 113, which is insane. I didn't expect to get 5, let alone anything over 100. You might have noticed that I don't exactly have the best upload schedule. You see, making videos takes a long time. The scripting takes a long time. The voice work as well. I have to go in there and record it with a better mic than this. I have the actual audio production on my separate computer here. I have the scripting, I have the research, I have the video editing, and then I have to deal with copyright. Oh god, the copyright. Seriously, that Radiohead video, the ranked one, I had to take it down about 30 times and re-upload it after so many different changes due to copyright. It's one of the reasons why all of my videos have live performances or just very, very low music in the background. YouTube is just so strict with that stuff. I can't really cut corners there, and in research and production and writing, I don't really want to rush any of the videos on this main channel, but this leaves me with quite an issue now in that a few people want to watch my stuff and it takes like 4 months per video. So instead, I've thought of a little compromise. I now have a second channel which I will upload to weekly. The content on Idle Ridin' won't be as well researched or scripted, and the production is pretty much going to be in the exact same setting as what you're seeing right now, with maybe footage or something right here. But that's just because it's a lot easier for me to just talk like this straight to the camera and put it right in my editing software, instead of recording in that booth, sending it back, putting it on this computer, editing it to the footage, and so on and so on. So this way I get to upload more frequently and the quality of the main channel doesn't dip at all. So yeah, just before I end this video, I want to say again, thank you for watching and subscribing if you did. I really do appreciate it. Plus, I know a lot of people subscribed just for the Radiohead video and ranking and reviewing. There are going to be more of those videos along the way, so don't worry about that. Alright, cheers. Thank you again. Bye.